Hello, everyone. Welcome to the UU Virtual Roundtable. My name is Sarah Reyes, and I will be today's moderator. Before we begin, I'd like to take the time to remind everyone that we are recording these sessions and will be uploading them onto our UUCLC YouTube page. And these are good just if you want to go back and rewatch them or share them with any other friends. So I do encourage you to take a look at that when you get the chance. And besides that, I hope you have a good roundtable session. And I will now be sharing my screen.
Okay, I'm going to go through about 10 slides, and most of them aren't very complicated. But before I start, back in my USDA career, for about, in the early 90s, I was head of a group that was looking for new uses for agriculture products. And we looked at hemp as one of them because previous time, it was a common crop, but we got put off by the drug enforcement people. They said, "No way, fella." So we weren't able to get into using hemp. But well, let me just start going through this slide. A short history of hemp in the U.S., and this is really short. Once upon a time, hemp was a common plant that grew in almost every part of the U.S. It was used in fabric, textiles, rope, sails, food, medicine, and many other things. But then the decade of prohibition followed when hemp was banned along with its cousin marijuana. That was the early 70s. They put them all into a category and said, "No way, not gonna do this stuff." So it was legalized again only recently in 2018. And the plant is returning to the US in a big way. Today, most of the hemp growing here is being used for CBD oil, supplement for arthritic pain. And I'll bet you a number of folks that are on this Zoom probably have used it. I know Marion has. And but anyway, a popular supplement. We're also seeing many new hemp products, from hemp t-shirts to hemp delivery and that sort of thing. So next slide, Sarah. Yeah, other products like hemp seeds, hemp seed oil. Hemp seeds are very nutritious. And a number of people are using it for that sort of thing. Next one. I'm just going through a few slides to show a few products. A power bar, a humming bar. I never seen that, but it must be on the market. But then hemp seed burgers. People are looking for ways not to eat meat and to substitutes. So anybody that's interested in alternative burgers, hemp seed is one of them. Next one, please, Sarah. Flavored water and hemp beer. I mean, the variety is unbelievable. So another one, please. T-shirts, shoes. The T-shirt is about half cotton from cotton plant and half of it from hemp. But the shoes are all hemp. Next one, please. Sunglasses. With all the concern we have about plastics in our lakes and oceans and so forth, this hemp disintegrates. Shampoo and conditioner. Next one, please. Okay, there's many uses of hemp, and there's the plant itself, textiles, and seeds and foods and leaves, and it's we'll hear more about the production from Jeff and so forth here in a minute. And then I think I have one more slide. Go ahead. Next one. I just want to mention this, that hemp growing in Canada became legal in 1998, and so they're way ahead of us. They have many a hemp industry and a trade alliance and Alberta Industrial Hemp Enterprise and all kinds of things. They legalized it way back in 98. We didn't legalize it until 20 years later in 2018. And even when I was still in federal government, we knew that they were going. We tried to convince our folks of doing it, but they didn't want to do it. So that's it. You can just tick that off now. Come back. And so that just an introduction to what hemp is and some of the products, and just to get us started. And so I think nextly we'll go to Jeffrey to talk about the production of hemp. Jeff?
Okay. I almost feel like I'm going to put a squelch on the hemp industry by saying a few things. But hemp isn't as easy as most people think. A lot of times you can plant a tomato, you could plant it in Minnesota or New England, or you could plant it in California, you know, and it's going to be the same tomato and grow pretty easy for most people. But hemp isn't that way. Hemp is very, very different, and it responds differently to the region you're trying to grow it in. So when we look at all these products we just looked at, like hemp fiber and plastics and grain and things like that, and if you currently look where most of that is being produced, there's a reason for it. So a lot of your grain and fiber is being produced way up north in Canada, and it's not just because Canada came on board first. The climate, the length of day. So hemp is a long day plant, meaning that in order for it to grow properly, it needs long days. And in most of New Mexico, does anybody know how long our days are here? The longest day here is? You know, say something. It's about 14 and a half hours. You know, that seems fairly long, but if you're one of these people that grew up north, like in Minnesota, it seemed like there was a 20-hour day practically.
Well, there was.
It was a long day. So, you know, you get even farther north in Minnesota into Canada, the days are really long. And the soils are good. Our soils in the Southwest desert here are really bad and poor. So, you know, you've got long days up north, good growing conditions, plenty of abundant rainfall, clean water, the ideal climate to be producing hemp like that. So the trouble arises in, if we want to grow hemp here, what do we need to do? So currently in the industry, what I have seen and discussed with people are that if you're going to consider growing hemp, the fiber, the seed production for food, that should be grown farther north because it's planted denser, you have more rain to take care of it, better soils. The climate's more ideal to grow those long hemp fibers that you want to grow. If you're looking to produce some kind of hemp here, you should consider it for CBD. So that's kind of why a lot of the people have jumped in on the CBD bandwagon. First off, it was worth a lot of money in the very beginning. And so if you were one of the first ones to get in on the market, you probably could have made a lot of money. Right now, you know, it goes from $40 to maybe $5 or less per weight there. So the price has come down quite a bit. So it's discouraged a lot of people. So 2019, people tried to grow hemp in New Mexico here. There was a huge contrast between successes and failures. Very few successes, I think, as opposed to a lot of failures. So a lot of people jumped in thinking they were going to make a lot of money, but we started discovering problems and what those problems were. And I'll get into the cultivation of that in a second, but one of the big things was the THC content. So the THC content is legal under 0.3, a little bit different in New Mexico, but 0.3 for virtually everybody. So 0.3, where did that number come from? So that number just kind of came about, I believe, I can't remember exactly, maybe Brad remembers, back in the 20s or so, and it was just an arbitrary number. There was no real research done to set that number, but they needed a number, so they set it at 0.3. So, you know, there's been a lot of arguments that that number should be adjusted up to at least 1 by people that are producing hemp. Currently on the market, there really aren't any cultivars that won't go hot. And when you say, use the term going hot, means it's going over the 0.3. And if you put a lot of money into growing the crop and it goes over 0.3, legally you have to destroy it by law. So you could have a lot of money put into the crop and it gets tested and you get the orders, you need to destroy the crop. So that can be very difficult. Now there is testing. So if you are growing it, and you could expect virtually all the varieties are going to go over that 0.3. You need to be testing it yourself on a regular basis once it goes into flowering. But you got, you know, before the Department of Agriculture starts doing their tests, what do you do, Brad? 2 tests before harvest, 1 or 2 tests. So before you hit that, and you want to make sure that you're not going to go over that legal limit, and then Brad's group will do the testing, get that done, and you know, don't go over the 0.3. That's the big thing. So difficult one right there. Now the problem in 2019 in New Mexico was, okay, we understand a lot of this, you know, getting a license to grow hemp and paying all the amounts of money that you have to pay to have the license and be able to grow hemp. So, you know, you could do all that and you understand that. And people did that. And then they got to the field and they just put the seed in the ground, or they put clones, cuttings in the ground, or whatever they were doing. They put all that in the ground and they expected, well, you know, hemp is so easy. You put it in the ground and it's just going to grow because it absorbs everything. Well, that isn't necessarily true. And that was one of the big things I saw in 2019 when following May, getting into midsummer, all of a sudden, I'm starting to get a lot of emails. What's wrong with my crop? Why is my crop failing? So those problems stemmed from our soil conditions. So we have alkaline soils. And I know for many of you that live in Doña County in this area know of zinc deficiencies on pecan trees. So what happened with the hemp? Well, they were suffering the same kind of deficiencies that pecans and some of our other crops can suffer as well. And it was a little more pronounced. So it became a matter, was it a zinc deficiency, zinc and manganese, you know, micronutrient deficiencies, or was it curly top virus? And so I asked growers to please submit samples to labs to get the nutrient analysis done on tissues there. And they all came back from various places all around the state. The number one thing with all the ones that were not doing well were zinc deficiencies. So I believe we learned something that first growing year, that we can grow it here, but you got to supply the zinc. And I actually have pictures of plants that are all curled up and they look pretty bad. Now discussing it with another agent that I know in Arizona, they were talking, they had a lot of curly top virus attacking their plants. And the two look fairly similar, but there's a bit of a distinction there. So you got to test. So there's testing involved. You can test for curly top, you can test for nutrient deficiencies. From what I saw in New Mexico, it did not look like curly top virus. It was, curly top virus doesn't wipe out whole fields in every county where hemp is being grown in New Mexico, all with the same symptoms like that. Usually curly top is a little more sporadic, maybe in big clusters, not just whole fields. So there's some more research that needs to be done on that. And that's one of the big problems with hemp, that there are no varieties. Like I can't tell you, you know, grow this variety and it'll be great in New Mexico and you'll get a good harvest for CBD and it'll be under 0.3 and you'll make lots of money. That doesn't exist. It doesn't exist here or Texas or Arizona or Nevada. And they're getting more selections up north. It's a little easier, like I said, up north because of their soils and their climates. So we need to find varieties here. In order to find the varieties here, we have to have universities, and universities are great because they're neutral entities to give you information, as opposed to a private industry. If they get the research done and find out the varieties, it's not likely they're going to tell you because they want you to buy from them. The university can do the research and find out what are the proper varieties. We can go through breeding, whether it's at New Mexico State University or Arizona, Nevada, and do breeding programs to try and create varieties that are better adapted to the southern part of the United States here, so that we'll be able to be in that production line. So the southern part, we have the sunshine to grow it. We have resources, we have land space to grow it. We just need to improve on our soils by adding the right micronutrients to those soils. And some of the people that did grow very well here in New Mexico were applying micronutrients. So with a little bit of discovery, here's one farmer, fields are completely yellow and brown and wiped out. Here's the farmer right next door and his fields look perfect, but he was using micronutrients. So as for the information on the internet or information different places, it's not as easy to grow in this, or at least in our area. You know, maybe I saw hemp being grown up in Michigan. It looked pretty easy up there. Good soils we looked at, well drained, natural rainfall, and beautiful fields of hemp they were producing up there. And so we have a challenge here because our water, if you're going to put in hemp, you got to, you know, put it on drip and you got to pay for the water. You have to do things like that. So I don't think the aim in the Southwest here is going to be for fiber. So you got to have decortication plants, you got to have processing plants, you got to have places to ship it to. There's a place, they're looking at a really large decortication plant over by Dallas, somewhere over by Dallas. But, you know, that's shipping from here all the way over to that area of the state. And, you know, a lot of those factors will have to be determined in the future, whether it's worth us producing that here or whether we produce really high grade CBD, CBG, CB, whatever, some of those products that because of our sunshine, we can get better products in those areas. Anybody have any questions?
Is there, can they develop a plant that will stay below that 0.3 level? Or is that very real hard?
That's very difficult. So, you know, for years, it's been developing it with high THCs illegally, and nobody wanted to develop it.
You want to sell it for marijuana, you want it high.
So, you know, you get into fiber hemp will produce very low THC, but, you know, then you don't get the CBD production really either. So, you know, there's a lot of breeding work that's going to have to come along. What we need to do is have, and I speak a little bit for Nevada here because they're going through this with their legislature, and we need to have it here too. In the licensing for the University of Nevada, for them to do research on hemp, to grow and find those varieties. If their varieties go over 0.3, they have to destroy them and they lose their license.
Oh, wow.
It's like a 3 strikes and you're out. They lose their license. So then that means they can't do the research. So there's got to be some kind of provision for doing the work at the university and hopefully regulating that THC content so that they can get it down without the university risking losing their license or going to jail and different things like that. And hopefully Brad will be able to speak to some of that.
Okay, very good. Brad, would you want to cut in and talk about some other aspects of this, you know, the marketing and so forth?
Sure, be more than happy to. My involvement in the hemp industry is both from the legislative process and developing the laws and regulations for the state. It's part of the administration. I oversee the hemp regulatory programs in the state. And then I'm also involved with hemp growers in production and various aspects of marketing and so forth on it. Let me start with the industry as a whole. And Jeff, please butt in whenever you feel, or anybody else on it. So the industry nationwide in hemp production is at a lull right now. And part of that is because when most of the nation started legalizing hemp, production increased significantly. It did what growers are very good at doing, they produce. And it went from a niche market to a commodity market in 1 year. And so I have friends of mine that grew over 1,000 acres of hemp in 2019. Prior to that, in most of the states, hemp was produced in very small acreage. So it went from a niche crop to something like corn in a very short period of time in that. So along with that, there are some, any agricultural crop is somewhat complex when it comes to making money. And so the intent of the legislatures in 2018 was that this would be a crop that would make money for the state. But it's a very complicated crop, as Jeff has alluded to in his discussions to it. And it's very complicated on a number of levels. So let me start at the demand level. For anything to be successful, there has to be a demand on that end of it. And so one of the issues with hemp is that although the primary product is CBD, is what people want and people are paying for, FDA and USDA have not ruled on how that hemp extract, that CBD oil, can be used in our food supply. So if you go to the shelves or you get on the internet, you can buy a bottle of CBD at a very expensive price, but legally you cannot go buy a food product that has CBD incorporated into it on the national level. You cannot buy a CBD infused beer or CBD infused water legally. So the products Paul was showing on his slide, those, if they are legally produced, are produced with the grain, and they're produced with the grain meal and those type of things. But they're not produced with the what people want to believe is the medical benefits of CBD and so forth. Now the same is with pets. You cannot buy pet food that is infused with CBD. You cannot feed hemp or hemp fiber to livestock that is going into commercial production. So all of these uses that we have for hemp are somewhat constrained until FDA, USDA, and other federal agencies actually rule on how we can legally use those things. Now, New Mexico is a little different. In New Mexico, if it stays within the state, you can infuse food products with CBD on that. Now, you can't feed livestock in New Mexico, but you can infuse products with CBD. So when the laws were drafted, New Mexico looked ahead at what probably the federal government would do on those things on there. So part of the puzzle that we have is demand. We do not have that settled in the United States at this point in time. The second part of the puzzle is manufacturing. And so hemp as a niche crop in the United States, in some of the states, manufacturing and extraction facilities were pretty small. A lot of the hemp products that were sold in states, the oils, the balms, all those things, they came out of people's garage operations and off their farm operations, so forth. So very small niche type of thing. So when we started producing hemp at a commercial level, those small operations cannot handle the volume of product that was coming at them. And so last year, when a lot of states commercialized it or legalized it, we had these huge volumes of hemp coming into manufacturing, but there were no extraction and manufacturing processes large enough and established in those states on there. Now, Las Cruces is relatively, lucky. Doña Ana County in 2008 had one of the largest hemp extraction facilities in the nation. And that was Bayad, Chile, that is north of Las Cruces up along the freeway. They extract red dye from Chile. Now, the process to extract that red dye out of Chile and extracting CBD or any of the other oils out of bud and flower hemp is exactly the same. And so Louis Bayad and his family says, well, there's probably a niche here. I can do this. And they did. And we're fortunate that they did that. So they invested in a few things up in that facility, and they became one of the largest extractors in the nation because of that. If you're not familiar with hemp and the difference in marijuana, I tell people it's the same thing as trying to look at hot chili and mild chili plants. There's no difference except in the breeding of it. So the same thing. So hot chili and mild chili, same plant, same everything, just a little bit of tweaking on that end of it there. Now, one of the issues we've had in developing manufacturing in the country and in New Mexico is financing. So the hemp industry originally over the past 2 to 3 years has been financed almost exclusively by venture capitalists. So these are companies, these are people, these are so forth that took a risk for a very high return expectation of that. And the reason why it was only venture capitalists is because the banking industry has lagged behind, for many years on how to finance hemp and what is legal to finance. The hemp or the banking laws in this country are a little gray in 2018 regarding the legality of hemp and whether if they financed it, if they would come up against any of the national banking laws that require reporting for suspicious activity on it. I have talked to a number of banking organizations over the years and so forth, and I have told them that in the United States, there has been, in the last 4 years, about 350 banks that handle marijuana money. Now, whether that's recreational marijuana, whether that is medical marijuana, did not make a difference. They handled marijuana monies. And the reason they did it is because their boards decided to take a risk. And so as long as they brought those dollars into the bank and reported to the federal banking institutions that this was a suspicious activity account, but they knew where the money was coming from and that production was legal in that state, the FCC did not bother them. The banking federal inspectors did not bother them. New Mexico has only had one bank for a number of years that would take either marijuana money or when hemp came in, that was an issue to find a banking. So banks, when the federal government started approving federal or state plans for the production of hemp, the banking industry has come a long way. So we no longer have banks that ask our hemp growers to throw their accounts out. We now have banks that are getting closer to loaning money for hemp businesses and so forth. So the availability of funding has been a big issue in the industry for banking, for building of these extractors and manufacturers and everything else. On the production side of it, as Jeff was talking about the issues in production, we can produce the heck out of hemp. I mean, Duke Rodriguez owns one of the largest hemp, probably, and cannabis marijuana facilities in New Mexico and Arizona. And his name of his company is Ultra Health. And they're a huge producer of medical marijuana in the New Mexico, Arizona area, and also the products that are come from medical marijuana. Duke and I were on a presentation for a civic organization, and Duke made a statement. He says, when it comes down to it and all the dust settles, the Southwest will remain one of the 3 or 4 primary growing areas for hemp in the country. We don't have the disease issues that they have where it rains all the time for outdoor production. Our indoor production is produced cheaper than anywhere else. In New Mexico in 2020, we had about 4 million square feet of indoor production of hemp in this state. Now, a lot of that is either going for clones, for replanting in the field, or it's going for the smokable market. So the smokable market for hemp is developing rapidly in the country on that end of it there. Let's see. And I'll give you somewhat of what's happened, and Jeff had talked about this too. In 2019, the state had about 7,500 acres of hemp production in it. That's the first year of production in the state. That is a lot of hemp. That is almost as much chili as is produced in this state. So in the first year, that's what we produced. In 2020, that 7,500 acres dropped to 2,000 acres because of that backflow of hemp production in the state. Let me see what I was going to talk to about. Oh, Jeff was talking about legislation for breeding. When we wrote the legislation for hemp breeding a number of years ago, we anticipated breeders. We do have a license that if you are a breeder, we allow for above the 0.3%. In fact, I think we're the only state in the nation that has made allowances for breeding back 2 years ago. We've also made allowances for manufacturing. We have in our laws, the laws that allow manufacturers to go above 0.3% when they're extracting from CBD in THC. You cannot extract from hemp CBD or any of the other cannabinoids without going above the 0.3% THC. So New Mexico, I believe, is the only state that we have legalized that, so our manufacturers don't have to worry about being arrested for possession above 0.3% THC. If you're a scrubber, that is a person that cleans up CBD and some of those things. Those people can have up to 100% THC on their premises without prosecution in the state. So New Mexico has really done a very good job on its laws in a number of ways in doing that. And the governor's office has also done a great job on extending state loans and so forth to businesses and manufacturers to help them get them started in the hemp industry. With that, I think I will shut up and we can address any questions or whatever you need to do, Paul.
Okay, well, thank you too very much. Did you have a comment, Jeff?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Brad for bringing those points out there about the 0.5 and that. It's really true. We are unique in the United States in our Department of Agriculture, and we are envied by other states because of what Brad talked about with our laws there.
Yeah. Yeah, that seems very important. What do they do, Brad, with the when they're above this 0.3? What can it be used for?
So if you're a grower, and this gets and part of this comes from when we started writing the legislation, we met with the medical marijuana groups, we met with the hemp people in the state, and so forth on it. And the agreement was that if you're over 0.3%, and we do allow you to retest. So if your crop comes in at 0.3%, most of the time when we retest a field or a greenhouse, it comes back under 0.3%. But if it's over 0.3% and you don't retest and so forth, there's no alternative but to destruct on it. And the reason for that is that the legislatures did not feel that communities in New Mexico would sign off on having products that are above 0.3% in the field and easily accessible to children next to schools, so forth and so forth on that. So, you know, if there was allowances in a law that allowed for alternative uses For above 0.3%, it's possible you could have a psychoactive concentration in a hemp or in a field. At that point in time, it's not hemp, and that it's accessible to children, yet could be legally used for some other measure, like going into the medical marijuana operations for extraction. Yeah. The medical marijuana producers did not want that competition in their business at the time. So destruction is it.
Yeah. Anyone else have comments or questions? How about you, Elaine?
Well, I am curious about whether there is enough capital. I was taking a lot of notes, so I wasn't sure that I got this part. What I think I heard was that the banking industry is beginning to make more capital accessible to hemp growing. Did I hear that correctly?
That is correct. If you're familiar with the banking industry, everything is dependent on the risk levels of boards. And one of the issues, I don't know if you don't, one of the issues in New Mexico, if you're familiar with any of, particularly community banks, they tend to be much more liberal in their lending than the larger banks, the nationwide banks on that. So they tend to be more community minded in how they're lending. One of the concerns a number of years ago with the community banks, and these are the smaller hometown banks that we have in the state, is that there is a lending and profit ratio that banks have within their boards. And their fear was that if they started accepting either, marijuana money or hemp money, there was the possibility that that ratio gets out of whack too much. And then there's some other things that come into play in the banking industry. So they've been very cautious about that. So they're beginning to learn about the hemp industry. I used to answer a lot of questions for the banking industry on hemp production and money and everything else. And so they're getting they're getting more knowledgeable about it. The boards are beginning to become more acceptable to it. I think as a whole, I've lived in the state a long time. I wasn't born in New Mexico. New Mexico has a history of being risk adverse in its lending. And it always has been for the last 50 years that I've been here. So that's part of it. So it's overcoming that risk adversity that they have. But yeah, they are getting better at it.
This is helpful. One of the things, as Paul said, I'm involved, as is Angela Merkert, who's also on this call. We're very involved in the public banking work and the Public Banking Bill Act that will be coming up in our legislature. And one of the things we've been looking at is in areas where there may be some risk aversion, or whether there is more rather than less, the public bank could potentially partner with the community banks and the credit unions to basically share the risk and open up more capital for entrepreneurs who would love to be growing something, be it hemp or something else, and not currently able to get the capital they need.
Yeah, that's a wonderful idea. Well, we're a risk-averse state for all of those things. I mean, it's just, but yeah, that if you could share that risk, that makes a lot of sense. So good luck to you all.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Angela. Oh, gotta unmute. Unmute.
Thank you, Paul. Good to be with you. Brad, can you share which of the community banks is accepting the hemp, the money now? You mentioned there was one bank.
Well, that was for marijuana monies.
Oh,
and, okay. And so I think and it's been a while since the CEO of the Community Banking Association retired last year, and I've not had a chance to visit with the new director for that organization. But I don't think there's any issues with accepting the money anymore. I know we had some in Las Cruces that I'd go and talk to boards and so forth on it. And so I think a lot of that has been has been laid away. I don't know if Jeff, if you've heard anything in Las Cruces or not.
No, I haven't heard anything about the banking. I know it had changed. It's more acceptable. In fact, there's insurance now too that has opened up.
Well, I do know that there are increased reporting requirements, and that's been one of the reasons why they've been holding back on what it means to keep reporting those suspicious, amounts of money coming in. But perhaps some of the reporting software support may have changed too, so that maybe something is working better for them on that administrative side too. It just made me curious about that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that helped is when states started recognizing the regulatory plans that a state has for hemp, that the banking industry kind of took a sigh of relief and didn't worry about it, because they knew that states were operating under an approved plan by the federal government and all those type of things. So that has made quite a bit of difference with that. USDA is working on their permanent rule for nationwide regulations. Right now, regulations for hemp production are still a patchwork between states. New Mexico does not allow some hemp to come in from some states because their regulatory arm is so weak. They don't test it. And so the state, we don't allow it to come in for processing or anything like that. So hopefully within this year, the USDA will have a national regulatory hemp program. And then we don't have this very difficult patchwork that we have in the country right now.
Thank you.
Anyone else have a comment or question, please? Go ahead, Charlie. Unmute yourself.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
I'm just curious, between the roots and the stems and the leaves, and you were mentioning the seeds, where is the CBD located? I mean, is it something that you can separate out the parts of the plants, and if one part isn't producing what you were after, then you can still have something from the other parts?
Me to take it? So most of it is in the trichomes and in the buds, your highest concentration. That's what people are generally after. When Brad was talking about smokables, that's what you want premium, is that top cola. It's called a cola, where the developing buds are, where the trichomes are, and all the oils are mostly at. There's little trace amounts in the rest of the plant as it goes down, but that's where your highest concentration is. That's
so it's in the seeds. It's in the seeds, right?
No. No, so it's, pretty funny advertising on TV when they say, oh, use this hemp seed oil for your joints, it'll take the pain away. I'm like, it's just oil, like cooking oil, because it doesn't, when you say hemp seed, it's not saying CBD oil.
Oh.
So I have my questions on that. But I wanted to ask Brad, to comment on something about licensing. So licensing, there is no individual license for one person to grow just plants for themselves. And there's one license basically, isn't there, Brad? Whether you grow 2 plants or you grow thousands of plants, it's the same license.
You're correct. During the development of the laws, we talked about that. It became a regulatory nightmare, and law enforcement's input was that it probably would just open the state up for individuals to grow marijuana, because you can't tell the difference unless you test it. And within New Mexico, the law enforcement does not have, or did not have, the test in place to even test the difference between marijuana and hemp. And so their preference was not to do that. So.
I get asked that question now and then. Is there a license just for growing like 6 plants, or is it different? No, it's all.
Yeah, same thing.
Yeah. Anyone else have a question? Yes, go ahead, Annette. Go ahead.
So when something goes over that percentage, could those plants not be used then for just fiber production, you know, make clothing out of it?
Not a CBD plant.
Oh, it doesn't have enough fiber in it? Or what's the reason?
It's too short. The way the fibers are harvested, they're decorrugated, they're stripped and long, you know, so the taller the plant, they're stripped up this whole long piece of hemp stalk, kind of like a huge bamboo cane, and peeling off those long strips.
So that it's actually a different type of hemp that you grow for making cloth.
It was bred differently.
Ah, okay. All right. Cool. Thanks.
Go ahead, Jane.
So, Jeff, didn't you say that the kind of hemp that would be good for making cloth and other products other than the CBD products, that does not grow well in this climate?
Probably not. You need those really long days, really good soils, and plenty of moisture with well-drained soils. Kind of like you find in the Midwest and towards Kentucky and up towards Canada and that. So really those long fibers. Yeah.
So I'm curious if what we can grow here is only really good for the most part for the CBD products. What seems to be the general attitude among people who make the laws about whether this is a good investment for our state?
So I'm going to go back a little bit and say that the fiber and seed might be producible a little bit better on the eastern side of the state. While the plants may not be as tall, my thoughts are, I just wonder if the fiber would be stronger because of our sunshine. A better quality fiber. But all this has to be done and looked at throughout the state as to what we can produce here well. So not saying just CBD, although we seem to be able to excel at CBD production here. And that's because of our sunshine. Whereas other parts of the world, they may have to add in lighting, especially in greenhouses and that. We have abundant sunshine here. So we have really great conditions. The one drawback is those micronutrients because of our higher alkaline soils. So hemp production, CBD in greenhouses works really well. The other problem with the production is we have a lot of dust here, and dust getting into the buds and things like that. You know, doing outdoor production can be a big problem in the future. Because how do you
John, did you have a question?
Yes, I have a question. Hello?
Yeah, no, I hear you.
Yeah, so my question is this: when I was in high school, which like a lot of us we probably remember, you could buy marijuana, and it was full of seeds. It was always just loaded with seeds, and you had to kind of get the seeds out of it, or else when you roll a joint, it would pop and it would burn holes in your T-shirt and all this kind of stuff, right? And apparently that's not true anymore. Nowadays, if you buy smokable marijuana, it doesn't have any seeds in it. And I mean, were people just real stupid about cultivating it back, 40 years ago, or what? What's going on? Why has that changed? So that's my question for the expert.
That was cheap marijuana, and the plants are male and female pretty much for the most part, although sometimes they can change. But your production, like for CBD or a high quality something else, marijuana, would be in the male plant. And so if you're growing from seed and you don't know your seed source, you can get a lot more female plants, which are the undesirable, and you get seed production. And so you were buying cheap stuff. It may not have been cheap.
You weren't getting good marijuana, in other words.
Yeah, so if they were growing it on the back shelf somewhere, you know, you got what you got.
Well, I think back in those days, what you were buying was about 5 or 6% THC. Now it's 22% THC. So,
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. So I want to ask my question in a little bit different way, because Jeff's answer, while it was very informative, it didn't get at the question I was really asking. For those people who really know the legislature across the state, what do you think their posture is at the moment if they think that investing in hemp in our state really is only going to be good for producing CBD products? Do they have a concern about what they see as the negative outcome of distributing CBD products?
I don't think I've ever run into the CBD products as being seen as a negative by any of the legislatures. I think they all look at that as a positive, and it, as more and more research is being conducted on the positive aspects of CBD, so forth on that. Mm-hmm. With respect to the fiber, on a worldwide issue, one of the issues with fiber and the developing of fiber markets, particularly like Jeff said down here in this part of the world, is we may have to compete with China on the fiber market. China produces a lot of hemp fiber at a very cheap price. Mm-hmm. So that means that we have to, like we do, and we do very well, it has to be a very high quality product output. So when I've given talks up in the northern part of the state where they have niche, sheep and niche weaving operations and so forth, I've always felt that the decortification of hemp up there and then the introduction of hemp into some of our wool weaving up in that part of the world would be a great part of a hemp operation. The northern part of the state remains a very niche area for a lot of agricultural products and so forth. And so it may have some of those things in there that they can incorporate into it. There was a significant, and Jeff may know more about it than I do, there was a very large decortification plant that was going or planned outside of Lubbock. And this was partially financed by the cotton growers in the High Plains. The High Plains is the highest concentration in cotton production in the country. And so they thought, well, maybe we could start incorporating cotton into our blue jean fiber type things into there. Well, that fell through, and then the backers of that have moved that plant, from what I understand, they have plans to move it into the Midwest, where, as Jeff said, we have a better shot at having a higher quality fiber in there. Mm-hmm. So now, I think the other thing is when I talk to people in Albuquerque and so forth, there are a lot of uses that are just not for cloth. You can introduce it into concrete. I think you can introduce it into our block manufacturers that we have up in Albuquerque, so forth in there. You can probably introduce it into adobe bricks. So we have some local uses that will be outlets for the fiber products in New Mexico on that. And if everything else failed, when USDA rules on it, you can feed it to livestock. So I think the legislators are still, they're not apprehensive about it, but everybody is in a wait and hold pattern on what's going to go on nationally and what's going to go on internationally with it. We can produce it. That's our positive, and we can produce it relatively cheaply and relatively high quality with some of the stuff in, and our growers have shown that in our, across the state in our climatic zones. There are some issues to be addressed, but all in all, we can produce it very well and a very high quality on it. We just need to get the processing in there. And there's a few individuals in the state. Jeff Apodaca, if you remember, Jeff ran for governor a number of years ago on there. Now Jeff is in the hemp business. He is one of the people that is really producing the manufacturing end of it. He is looking at decortications. He's out beating the country for financing to increase his operations up there in Albuquerque and Santa Fe. And so that's what's going to take also on the private sector, is those type of visions and those people that know how to do those type of things.
I didn't realize that China had a fairly major production of hemp. How about Canada? Are they pretty, is there Canada production, Jeff or Brad, do you know?
Canada's got great production. I think most of theirs is in seed as opposed to fiber.
Oh, for
so,
fiber.
Yeah, like Brad was saying, you know, we can produce all kinds of hemp here. It's just the competition, whether it's economically feasible to produce fiber hemp with our limited resources and water.
Right.
If we're going to do that, our products have to be so much better. We know they can be better in CBD.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Jane, go ahead. You're muted. Jane, you're muted.
Yeah, I'm sorry. How much water does it take to produce hemp as compared to producing pecans?
Quite a bit less.
Okay.
On drip. It's been compared to what, 3.5 acre feet of water, around there, 4.
Okay.
Yeah, it's probably 4 acre feet. Pecans is 5 to 5.5.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, anyway, we're getting, go ahead. Annette, you had a comment, question?
Yeah, as far as I remember, you know, they're growing quite a bit, the fiber hemp in Eastern Europe as well. And I think I remember they are getting even 2 crops a season. But then they have more just rainfall, you know, you don't have to water it. So kind of, so would that also, I mean, our problem down here would be, again, that we don't have as much sunshine, right? So we couldn't get 2 crops out of it, right?
Oh.
We have plenty of sunshine.
No, I mean, daylight. The daylight stuff,
long enough daylight. And I think it's a matter of the long enough day length and the amount of moisture. And so when you get
both of those
and humidity, you're going to get that plant stretching up and growing because you've got that nice pure water. I mean, I always complain to my friend in Oregon who lives there and grows plants, and I'm like, yeah, that's because you live in Oregon. You get great water and everything. Things grow like incredibly beautiful there.
Yeah. So if you live up there by the Baltic, you got
in
the summertime, you got more daylight and more moisture. That's why you get 2 seasons. And
the other thing I was reading about recently about like fiber hemp. Fiber hemp isn't the same like regular hemp either. You know, it has its niches and that. And if we're going to look at fiber, it was recommending that we need to look at Italy and what the varieties are growing in Italy that are better adapted to drier climates for fiber as opposed to Eastern Europe.
Well, our what the heck, EU, you know, that I have some clothes that come from there. Shouldn't we compare like what they're growing there? I mean, that's a desert.
In Eastern Europe?
No. Arab Emirates of whatever their name is.
Arab Emirates?
Yeah.
Arab Emirates?
Yeah.
I have some clothes from there. That's at least what the label says.
You're probably manufactured there, but was the hemp grown?
Oh, then they might not be growing the stuff there.
Right.
Oh, okay, that could be it too. Yeah.
Okay, well, we're towards the end of our session here. I see Sarah's come up on the screen. And I just want to indicate next week, we'll have a lady by the name of Amy Fletcher. She's a physical therapist, and she'll talk about how us old folks keep healthy as we grow older. She's a physical therapist at the physical over here. And I've gone there for physical therapy, and she's well-spoken and she has training in that area. So I think it'll be advantageous for us to listen to her. So.
Good.
So, okay, I think that's it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great
Good
afternoon.
session.